Hello everyone, Professor Siegel. Welcome to the podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing a scene from the 1995 Othello movie directed by Oliver Parker, the one with Lawrence Fishburne and Kenneth Branagh as Iago. And in particular, we're going to be discussing the How Am I Then a Villain scene with Iago in that film. And the reason why I selected this scene is because I feel as though this is one of the most, if not the most, Iago scene that basically sets the tone for who his character is. And it's a very, very interesting and also very cynical and devious character that, needs to be analyzed, of course. And so in this episode, what we're going to be looking at is number one, what Iago says and what happens and how this is portrayed in the film, how, maybe lighting or scenery or how the director wants Iago to be perceived and everything surrounding that. And we're also going to be discussing as well other comparisons to other renditions of, Iago's character, specifically from the Royal Shakespeare community or chamber, I think it is. And we'll look at that as well. Okay, I'll start by setting the framework for the scene in the movie. So it's just Iago in this scene. He is addressing the audience by himself, and he is essentially revealing to the audience his true intentions and true character, and with that his plan for what he's going to do with the movie. And he starts off with a rhetorical question, which says, "What's then that says I play the villain?" Okay, and so basically it's saying, how could I possibly be a villain? Which of course is making reference to how the outside world, the other characters in the play, perceive him, because he doesn't seem at face value, or at least the way he presents himself around Othello and other characters like Michael Cassio, which we'll get into in a second. He is perceived as good, as a good guy, as somebody who is like a genuine, honest person. But when things are left alone and we see Iago behind closed doors, we clearly see that he's this very cunning, manipulative, jealous, troubled man who basically is set out to sabotage Michael Cassio, who's been recently promoted instead of him to a higher rank under Othello. And his intent is essentially to manipulate Othello to believe that his wife, Desdemona, is cheating on him with Michael Cassio. Okay, so now that the greater layer of foundation has been laid for the context, I'll get into the scene. So in this particular scene, like I mentioned, he starts off with a rhetorical question, how am I then the villain? And in the first half of the speech, the way he presents himself, the way he's talking, his tone, his body language, his facial expressions, they all express that, it's basically kind of like this. Yeah, how could I possibly be the villain? Like that demeanor, that exact demeanor, which is the whole point, because he's basically just, self-addressing the fact that it's like, yeah, I can manipulate these people. They're not going to know. And he goes into this for greater context and says, when this advice is free, I give an honest, basically saying that, I am honest. They perceive me as honest, and they will not suspect anything. They trust me. And in that speech, he basically sets the tone that, Othello is so in love with Desdemona, and Desdemona is so lustful for Othello. But then right in the middle speech, there's aggressive and immediate turn in terms of cinematic display, where it goes from that sort of, how will Othello know it's me, to the divinity of hell. All roads to hell are paved with good intentions, essentially, is what he says. And then he outlines, the plan he has to manipulate Othello into believing that Desdemona having an affair with Michael Cassio, something he has also, he believes as well, by the way, that Othello has done to his wife. So just something kind of interesting there. Kind of just basically, I think that's a detail to show that Iago is a very, very jealous man, which certainly adds up considering his actions and how he is very manipulative and often trying to, thread the needle with the characters and try to basically bring their downfall upon them, as that's what jealous people naturally are inclined to do. Just for a little extra context, Iago is a very cynical, very disturbed man. He is very, very, I would say, hypersexualized almost, as he's often talking about in the play, women and just a lot of stuff like that. And he's very, very, as well, hyper judgmental of women relative to men, I noticed in the play. And I think that's also kind of a symptom of Iago's character. I mean, it's pretty consistent with everything else. He's obviously, he is the type of person to treat people as pawns in chess. He's very manipulative, and he uses other people only as a means to progress what he wants to do. Just to better visualize this transition in the middle of the speech as well, it goes basically, the tone, he's like, how am I then a villain? To counsel Cassio directly towards a parallel course to his good. Divinity of hell. He leans in and basically changes his tone like 180, flips it 180 degrees, and is basically saying that he is going to, gets into the more cynical, more genuine and consistent tone with what he is actually plotting, as it's almost like the first half of the speech is basically like a facade, or this, propped up like sort of fake personality, whereas the second part, he removes that filter and is now basically outlining the entire plot of the movie. As far as drawing ties to another version of Othello in the film category, I was not able to locate a specific scene on YouTube about the How Am I Not a Villain scene, but I was able to locate, of course, multiple Iago scenes from the Royal Shakespearean community. And specifically, Act 1, Scene 3, the I Hate the More speech from Iago, which of course will be linked in the note sheet to compare. But I find that there's still use in comparing the way Iago as the character is represented, and I believe that this can be dissected properly with these two scenes as examples. So, of course, as I mentioned a little bit already, Iago in this film version of Othello is presented as this very cunning and manipulative masquerading figure who can play the role of really any character he needs to be for the time. And while I haven't seen the full version of the Royal Shakespearean community, or whatever it is, I can see that in the way Iago is represented in the other form is it's a lot different. It's basically Iago is, of course, has all the same motives. He's still the same fundamental character, but he's not really this, I find him not as fake or as manipulative, at least in his character and the way he expresses it, in the version portrayed by Kenneth Branagh. I find that version is far more, I personally get the chills more from that version than I do of the other version from the Royal Shakespearean community, because this version of Iago, that version of Iago, the other version is, yes, he's basically presented, he makes demands, I hate the more, and he's clear about making his statements, but he's not as intimate and as, how could I possibly be the villain? How could I possibly manipulate Othello into believing that that Michael Cassio betrays him, or that whatever. And this other version of Othello is, I just don't find that same sense of like personality, making this version of Iago, I think, far more lethal and threatening. So I have seen and read Othello. I've seen this version of the movie specifically, and I find that this version of Iago is, for one, very well played, but very, very interesting in the way he is presented, in the sense that he's so kind of evil, in the sense that he presents himself as such a net good and such a positive person, or at least honest person, honest man. However, he, behind closed doors, he's this extremely cynical, basically the whole point of the movie. Like, Iago is the person, he's the true antagonist of the film, obviously, or of the play. And this scene is so important. Basically, it's early on, and this is Act 2, Scene 3. This is early on in the film. But this is so important, and I think laying the foundation for the whole movie. Like, without this scene, the movie probably would just not be as good, or at least as understandable. But this scene basically gives the audience a clear, concise understanding of the character that Iago is in Othello, which is essential to getting the true, genuine experience of Othello, whether you consume it through reading or, in this instance, through the 1995 film. Iago is this master manipulator, sort of like almost psychopathic, just I wouldn't even say crazy, but just this very troubled, jealous man who's clearly very, very smart and very, very sharp, and knows what is going on. He's very conscious and very aware, and in spite of that, he elects to do these very, very, very wrong things. And I think is very much admits that he knows deep down he is a villain, but he understands that that is not a position that he can just broadcast out to the other characters in the play. Therefore, it's so interesting to me that he is basically willing to address to the audience. Basically, he knows, because some people are evil and they don't know. But Iago is very self-aware, which makes him all the more scary, because, you might see like a video or something or whatever in real life or whatever of like some guy, probably not smart, just some guy like robbing a 7-Eleven. And you think, yeah, that's evil, but that's just probably some guy who's, maybe he's on drugs, or you just think it's probably some stupid person. In this case, that like Iago is anything but. Iago is extremely intelligent, and when you combine high IQ and intelligence and understanding with that kind of level of cynicism or evil, that is something that is far more threatening, I find. And I think that's kind of why there's such a strong draw to Othello, because it's basically a story of how smart and smart and capable people can do serious damage in terms of manipulation, which is exactly what happens in this play. One more piece of imagery I just wanted to touch on from this scene is near the end, where Iago leans down over a fireplace, and basically when discussing how he's going to use Desdemona's pre-existing inclinations to manipulate her, which also, by the way, again, is another highlight of Iago's dangerous intelligence. He leans down and goes, "I will turn her virtue," grabs the wood that burns his hand severely, you can hear it, "and I will turn that virtue into pitch." Drops the wood and rubs his hands together. And I feel as though, just from the director's perspective, that this was a very, very, I think that was honestly perfect, the way they did this, because it basically is kind of while he's explaining what's going on, it's also like a physical representation of what he's basically setting up to do, which is to destroy the fabric of the interpersonal relationships amongst everybody in this play. In any case, that is going to do it for today's podcast episode on the Iago scene in the 1995 Othello movie. I think understanding this scene and dissecting it is very useful when trying to understand Iago's character, and of course Othello as a whole, which you need to understand Iago very well to understand Othello, as I believe that Iago, I think, is the most important and relevant character from the play. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and I really hope that you found this insightful.